How effective is our activism? Is what we're doing working?
Here's something you don't see often in farm country.
They're feeling affected. There's a moral conflict happening within them, and whether that comes out as hatred towards us or mockery, they're feeling something.
We're joined by Amy Soranno.
Animal liberationist Amy Soranno on the show.
We need to stop obeying laws that allow mass murder.
If we are serious about justice and the need for fundamental change, it cannot be business as usual.
We will stay locked down until either Interior Savings agrees to drop their sponsorship of Rimfest or until we are removed.
We're going to continue escalating our tactics until Rimfest is shut down. We are here to expose the realities of factory farming here in Canada. We believe that most people would not want to support this industry if they knew what they were paying for.
We need to create problems that will not go away until they are addressed. And I hope that what you can take from observing this conference is that we cannot be stopped. Holy fuck, right? I wish I didn't have to be here today. It's upsetting to me that we even have to have this conversation. My life as an activist isn't fun. I'm facing charges and jail time as a result of this work because I'm considered a terrorist, which has led to me being relentlessly tracked and heavily monitored by the police. But the worst part is the traumatic images that are always haunting me, which is why it's hard for me to stand here and talk to you all today without a sense of urgency. I'm fighting to end something that seems so obviously immoral that it's shocking to me that I need to go to such great lengths in order to convince people that what we're doing to animals is wrong. People have told me that my passion and concern for animals is too much, that I'm radical and too outspoken, and that if I'm simply quiet and kindly write a letter to people in positions of power, that change will come. But that's just not true. Changes throughout history were not achieved without mass, direct action. And if standing up for what is right is considered radical, I will accept that title. But why do I care? Why have I dedicated my life to fighting for other animals? You may have noticed that I said other animals instead of just animals. As human animals, we believe that we deserve fundamental rights that are protected by law. Rights not to be tortured, enslaved, or murdered. Perhaps this is because we empathize with one another as each of us feel pain and suffer. But should non-human animals have the same fundamental rights? We know that they have a subjective life experience. Science is increasingly teaching us that non-human animals have intricate emotions. Not that we should even need studies in order to acknowledge that every animal is so complex. We recognize when our companion animals are happy, scared, anxious, in pain, or playful. That's their sentience. The animals people exploit have that too. All non-human animals have unique personalities and preferences. They play and communicate. They feel sorrow and desperately try to avoid pain. And just like us, they don't want to die. Perhaps we aren't smart enough to know just how smart other animals are. We know it's immoral to needlessly take the life of a human animal. But is it immoral to needlessly take the life of a non-human animal? Why is our default to put other animals below humans? Is it because they don't look like us and they speak languages we don't understand? But why is there an assumption that because of our differences, it's acceptable to exploit and kill them? The fact that the most innocent and vulnerable beings must prove to us that they are worthy of life says more about humans than it does animals. Society teaches us that eating, wearing, and using animals is not only normal, but natural and even necessary. Yet the largest bodies of nutritional professionals have stated that a diet void of all animal products is optimal for all stages of life. And scientists have created alternative forms of testing in order to eliminate torturing animals in laboratories. There is now faux fur, silk, leather, feathers, and wool. And in our modern society, the options for entertaining ourselves is endless, eliminating the need for aquariums, zoos, rodeos, circuses, and other forms of animal exploitation for our amusement. We do not need to love animals or understand them or even like them in order to recognize that breeding, mutilating, confining, torturing, and murdering innocent animals for things that we do not need is wrong. If we value rights in the human-animal context, I feel that we should be consistent and value rights in the non-human animal context. So what is the appropriate way to respond to injustice, oppression, exploitation, and murder? I am vegan, but is that enough? Does refusing to eat, wear, and use animals mean that I'm acting compassionately or saving lives? We don't pat people on the back for not being racist or sexist. They're simply being a decent human being. I think veganism is the same. Choosing to not pay someone to slit the throat of an animal is truly the least we can do. Veganism reflects the absolute minimum of justice that we owe others. By being vegan, we're not stopping the exploitation and killing of animals. We're simply not contributing to it anymore. And contrary to what people told me, the severity of this situation does not call for silence or the occasional email. It calls for direct action, matching the intensity of what we're fighting to end. As the summer approaches, we will no doubt hear warnings of caution regarding leaving dogs in hot cars. If you were to come across a puppy who was suffering from severe heat exhaustion in a vehicle, raise your hand if you would smash the car's window in order to help that dog. If you would, then you understand direct action. The main focus of my work is direct action. I'm an undercover investigator. I conduct rescues, and I organize mass civil disobedience actions. I am not paid for my work. No one has hired me, and no one invites me onto their property in order to do these things. I just strongly feel that in this one life that I have, I need to give animals the visibility that they deserve. I model my work widely on past social justice movements and what they did in order to achieve change, such as refusing to comply with certain laws as a form of political protest, and deliberately breaking laws that are unjust. If we follow laws that we believe are wrong, like those allowing the exploitation of animals, then we are enabling these injustices to continue to happen. But here's the thing. Most people don't even believe that these injustices even exist. We're taught that animals used for agriculture are treated like family. And we're fed marketing terms like humane, local, free range, and grass-fed. We really do have such a close relationship with animals, don't we? We wear them, and eat them, and use products tested on them. But wait a second. We don't ever see them. So I'm going to share with you about how I've tried to change that. Some of the most profound experiences I've had have been in pig facilities. Pigs, as we know, are some of the most intelligent animals on this planet, even more so than dogs and 3-year-old children. They're incredibly deep and smart creatures. Because of this, they're also the most confined animal. When you walk into a room full of mother pigs who are kept inside metal cages, you hear the metal clashing around, and you see these pigs repeatedly trying to move the bars containing them, nudging them over and over, trying to escape. This is a standard industry practice. All mother pigs are confined in metal crates the size of their bodies, their entire lives. They can stand up and sort of lie down very uncomfortably, but that's it. They can never run or even walk. They are forced to live on cold, filthy concrete floors. And despite being social and maternal creatures, they can never interact with others. These pigs can't so much as turn their heads to look around. All they can do is stare at whatever happens to be in front of them, and for some, that means a cement wall. The eyes of pigs are so human-like, which makes their facial expressions easy to read. These mothers are so scared and confused. They are forced to repeatedly give birth into a situation where they can't so much as turn to look at their babies or move to protect them from harm. I've witnessed a piglet die right beside her mother's face. The mom was just staring at her dead baby with such horror in her eyes, unable to do anything. The dairy industry also exploits mothers. The whole industry relies on stealing babies as soon as they're born in order for us to drink the milk that's intended for them. We do these things to animals with no consideration of how it impacts them emotionally. One thing has been consistent among all the farms and species of animal that I've met and documented. They are suffering from not only unimaginable psychological distress, but intense physical distress. Animals who are exploited for their flesh, eggs, or milk are given just enough space, air, food, and water for only the strongest to survive until slaughter age. The rest suffer terribly and eventually succumb to their inevitable injuries and illnesses. Countless individuals die on farms every day. This is considered normal in the animal agriculture industry. All farms have a daily death count. The chickens that people eat are so genetically messed with that by the age of just 5 weeks old, they are full adult size and sent to slaughter, when naturally they would still be little small chicks. I've seen trucks of chickens being hauled into slaughterhouses, and these birds are still peeping, and many still have fluffy yellow feathers on their necks. They arrive at the slaughterhouse with broken legs, and some experience organ failure. They're just babies. But we have forced them into bodies so big that their little organs and bones can't keep up. When I'm documenting hens on conventional egg farms, gaining access to these facilities can be quite tricky. The hens are usually housed on the second level of the barn. There are doors to get in on the second floor, but there are typically no stairs to get up to those doors. There have been times where my colleagues and I have created a human ladder, and we stand on each other's shoulders and pull each other up. Or we found a ladder on the farm property in order to reach the door and just hope that it's unlocked. Between the ground level and the second level, where the hens are kept, there is no floor in between, just panels for workers to walk along. The hens are held up by metal machinery and wire cages, and the ground level is where the birds' excrement fall. By the time the hens reach slaughter age, which is between 12 to 18 months, the piles of feces is nearly as tall as me. Every time I investigate an egg farm, I go down into these shit pits and it's not uncommon that hens are stuck down there, unable to move or reach any food or water. They are left to suffer and slowly die an awful death. It's a common misconception that free-range eggs are more ethical. The free-range factories that I've investigated are arguably more horrific than the cage facilities. These hens are kept in massive, windowless warehouses where they never see outside or breathe fresh air. But instead of having a few birds in a small cage, tens of thousands of birds are crammed into one massive cage. They still come from hatcheries, where all the baby male chicks are killed on their first day of life. They still have their beaks cut off, and they're still slaughtered as soon as their egg production declines. The term free range eases our conscience as consumers, but it means nothing for the animals. Mutilations, extreme confinement, unnatural, filthy living conditions. These are all inherent things within the animal agriculture industry. Around this time last year, I organized Canada's first mass lockdown event called Meet the Victims, where I was arrested on a pig farm in Abbotsford for going in and documenting the realities of modern-day farming. 200 people attended this event. 65 activists followed me inside one of the barns, and the rest stood outside of the facility conducting a protest. This pig farm is considered an industry-leading, humane, local family farm. Yet these barns didn't look anything like the images that are marketed to us. They more resembled concentration camps. Entirely enclosed, massive cement buildings, each barn the length of a professional football field. Outside, you couldn't sense any indication that there were animals nearby. You couldn't hear anything or see any pigs grazing on fields. But what you did see were multiple dumpsters full of dead piglets with blood splattered everywhere. Stepping into the barns was an assault to the system. We were suddenly hit with the overwhelming smell of death and toxic air that burned our throats and nostrils. As soon as the door opened, we heard the roaring sound of machines and squeals of distressed pigs. I've heard happy, healthy pigs, and that was not it. The sounds of those pigs was chilling. And most profoundly, we were met with the vision of something reminiscent of a horror movie. Row upon row of pregnant pigs confined in metal crates where they're unable to take more than one step forward or backwards. Some pigs were bleeding and had tumors, hernias, and gashes all over them. I spent time with one pregnant pig whose face was completely beaten and bruised. She was laying in a pool of her own blood and had a massive, deep cut that went all the way down her spine. She was cold and shivering and didn't move for hours. Everywhere I looked, there was more and more suffering. This farm was reminiscent of a torture chamber. It's terrifying to witness what humans are capable of inflicting upon others. But after 8 hours, we had to turn away. Close those doors and leave them behind. That was by far the hardest part. I have all this freedom and autonomy, and they have nothing. I walk in, witness their suffering, and I know what will happen to them in the end. Yet I leave. I carry that. When you witness what's happening to other animals, it's impossible not to be affected by it. I have developed PTSD and bouts of depression as a result of this work. I have nightmares almost daily replaying the things that I've seen. Unfortunately, frontline animal activism seems to be this revolving door where people come and go because it's hard work, it's emotional, and often becomes too much to handle. But it would emotionally kill me to do nothing. The animal crisis is so massive that it can be easy to live in a panic. But I instead choose to acknowledge the problems and respond to them with, what can I do? How can I help? My form of coping is to keep fighting harder every day and learning to be okay with the fact that no matter what, I'm doing all that I can. I hold on to hope that someone will connect with the stories and images that I share. And on the field, whether I'm investigating or rescuing or participating in mass actions, I'm there doing a job, and there's no time or room for me to be emotional. I just need to focus, get the job done, and deal with my emotions later. I cannot talk with anyone about most of the work that I do, not even friends or family. In some cases, not even therapists. It's such sensitive information that could have serious consequences. But these stories and experiences pile up inside, and I just want to get it out. But I can't. There are a small few who I trust to do investigations with, and outside of that, I have to be silent. At this point, I've come to generally know what to expect when I step into a new facility, but occasionally, I am surprised. I had one of those experiences just a few weeks ago. My colleagues and I were checking out a location that we had never been to before, and right off the bat, I had an unsettled feeling. My initial reaction was that the facility had been abandoned. The factories were so disheveled that I figured there was no way the farm was still in operation. Now, of course, this is in the middle of the night. It's pitch black, and we can barely see. And as soon as we opened the first barn door, we could hear rustling sounds inside. So I thought, oh my gosh, there are animals here. And the second we clicked on a flashlight to take a peek, we were swarmed by hundreds of rats. There are usually mice on farms, but nothing like this. That was definitely a first. But that wasn't even the worst part. Eventually, we did find farmed animals who were living amongst these rats. And the last barn door that we looked inside, there wasn't more animals, but instead, a small, disgusting, DIY slaughterhouse. There were cones covered in blood, where they shoved the animals inside, pulled their heads through, and slit their throats. There was blood and bodies scattered everywhere. From what we gather, this place is a part of some kind of black market meat trade. Knowing that this facility was running illegally, and there was very apparently no animal welfare taken into consideration, it was unnerving to be there. But no matter what farm I go to, the animals are not thriving. They are deprived of everything that comes naturally to them. They suffer. And on this farm, it was exceptionally bad. I wish I could say more, but we are conducting an ongoing investigation at this facility in hopes that it will lead to public exposure. And due to the illegal nature of obtaining this footage, when the time is right to release the images, it will be done anonymously. As I said, usually when I'm doing investigative work, it's just that, work. I go in, get the job done, and deal with my emotions later. But this was one of those moments where I couldn't override my emotions. I left that place feeling so heartbroken and angry. I just kept cursing humans, saying how much I hate people. That's not actually true. I don't hate humans. I hate what humans are capable of. I hate what we're doing to each other, human and non-human. But somehow, I still believe in the goodness of people. I recognize that there are driving forces like cultures and traditions that dictate why people do these things and why they feel it's justifiable. I also recognize that while us humans are the cause of the problem, we are also the solution. A few months ago, myself and other activists locked down Interior Savings Credit Union. We did this because Interior Savings is the main sponsor of the annual summer event, RibFest. Now, Ribfest has been the target of animal rights and environmental protests for years. In fact, Ribfest was the first protest I ever attended. But despite outreaching the public, contacting the sponsors, and holding protest signs, nothing has changed. The media didn't publish our stories, we were mocked by Ribfest attendees, and ignored by the event organizers. Just like with anything in life, if what we're doing isn't working, then we need to take a step back and reassess our actions. We needed to take direct action that would generate public exposure and bring this issue to the forefront. And finally, after years, our lockdown generated mass media attention and forced Interior Savings and the organizers of Ribfest to publicly acknowledge our concerns. Of course, Ribfest isn't the end-all be-all to end animal exploitation. But if we can get the sponsors to pull funding, Ribfest would likely be shut down, which would have a huge social impact and send a strong message. There are many tactics and strategies to use within animal activism, and this is just one local focus. And leading up to any event, there's a lot of research that goes on behind the scenes. If protesting outside of a business or event isn't cutting it, which in this case it wasn't, then we needed to research who the event organizers are, how the event is funded, who the decision makers are within each sponsorship, and so on. It is so important for us to not only be educated on the animal exploitation that we're protesting, but also the ins and outs of the event itself. This is the same for investigations. I track slaughter schedules, I research where these animals are being sold. I learn the time frames when farm employees are working. For instance, although dairy farms are far more open and easily accessible than most, investigating can be very tricky because the milking never stops. So they tend to have workers present 24/7. There's so much to consider when doing this work. I spend hours on Google Maps studying the aerial views of barns and the layout of these farms. And a big aspect is mapping out where we will get dropped off and how we can walk onto each property unseen, and planning an escape route if we do happen to get caught. The more we understand, the more we can dismantle this violent system. Last summer, myself and 3 other female activists stormed a slaughterhouse in Toronto, where 500,000 chickens are slaughtered each day. We ran onto the kill floor, laid down, and cement was poured over our chained arms, preventing any more killing from taking place. Laying on a blood-stained floor at the feet of aggressive police officers, surrounded by machinery designed to kill, is a humbling experience. I was scared. I was in pain. And it was emotionally overwhelming, being in a building that's sole purpose is to kill innocent animals, and seeing the crates of birds who were next in line. But our fears and discomfort are nothing compared to what those chickens experience. Chickens are individuals. They are smart and filled with so much personality. But just because this world views chickens as products, they are born and killed in absolute hell. They will never exhibit behaviors that come naturally to them, and the only day they ever get to breathe fresh air is the day that they die, on their way to the slaughterhouse. Although they are small, and they have wings instead of arms, and our existence seems so different from theirs, this does not, by default, mean that they are less deserving of life. Our inability to understand someone does not give us free rein to kill them. Until I started rescuing chickens and getting to know them, I had no idea how epic they are. They are quirky little creatures who are filled with so much life if just given the opportunity. Which is why it's so heartbreaking to see these incredible beings treated so differently than other animals that we cherish and love. This is blatant speciesism. I know that I wouldn't think twice before smashing a car window for a suffering dog. So why wouldn't I act with the same urgency for a suffering chicken, pig, or any animal? If you were to see an injured robin on your porch, I imagine all our instincts would be to help that individual, not rip their body apart and eat them. There is such a disconnect. We need to look at this not through our eyes, but through the eyes of the victims. We're taught to pick and choose which animals we love and which animals we murder. We love dolphins, but we kill salmon. We force pigs into gas chambers, but we wouldn't do that to horses. We wouldn't farm cougars or eat eagles. We exploit the defenseless. This is a matter of justice. We must look at this through the eyes of the victims. Living beings are exploited and killed simply because they look and act differently. This is needless suffering and death, and I, along with so many others, want this to end. What gives me hope is that there is a growing movement of animal defenders. People across the world are pushing through their fears in order to uphold justice. The largest event I ever participated in was in California at the Animal Liberation Conference. 700 activists charged the largest duck farm and slaughterhouse in the United States. As we drove to the location, in a caravan of buses, we had police vehicles chasing us and a police helicopter circling above. The police eventually blocked the road with cars and crime scene tape. The activists all got out of our buses, and the police told the massive group of us that if we crossed the line, we would all be arrested. Out of the hundreds of activists standing on that road, 15 of us decided to storm through the police line. There were not enough police to grab us all, so most of us effectively got by with no arrests. After we had been walking down the road for a few minutes, we heard a crowd of voices behind us. We turned around, and there were our friends. All the other activists, hundreds of them, took our lead and crossed the line. When we arrived at the duck facility, despite our peaceful and nonviolent behavior, we were swarmed by riot cops in full gear. They called in the troops that day. Machine guns, buses, everything you'd expect if it was a war. Resources were not spared to protect this one business from being exposed. It's moments like these that demonstrate just how scared the animal harming industries are. They fear us. Every day, our numbers are growing bigger and stronger. But we must not be blinded by that. Because even though animal activism is becoming more common, we are still consistently seeing the number of animals being killed each year growing. New research was just released showing that the number of land animals that are killed in slaughterhouses globally is increasing significantly. In 2017, nearly 75 billion land animals were murdered. In 2018, that number jumped to 77 billion in just 1 year. And these numbers don't reflect sea life, animal testing, hunting, or any other animals who were killed outside of slaughterhouses. So although the growth of plant-based food options and vegan celebrities seems to be skyrocketing, and huge shifts are being driven by dialogue and exposure, we must not be fooled into thinking that the animals are winning, because they're not. They're losing terribly. When I'm investigating farms and slaughterhouses, I'm continuously shocked by the normalized violence. I'm equally shocked by organizations that are designed to protect animals because they fail them so miserably. The SPCA is the only animal welfare organization in BC with the authority to enforce animal cruelty laws for farmed animals. They have been given so much power to oversee these animals that they have authority nobody else does. I have filed countless animal cruelty reports with the SPCA, and even with glaringly obvious criminal animal cruelty and letters from lawyers giving their legal opinion, these reports are continuously ignored. The SPCA follow the Canadian Code of Practice, which are the only guidelines in this country for the care and handling of farmed animals. Most of the Code of Practice is classified as a recommendation. Other parts are considered requirements. But even in the requirements section, the language is often vague and could be interpreted in different ways. For instance, what constitutes as prompt treatment of animals? How is prompt defined? What constitutes unnecessary suffering? How is unnecessary defined? With the pig farm that I previously mentioned, we provided hidden camera video footage to the SPCA and outlined several clear code violations where even the most generous interpretation of the code wouldn't be able to get around them. These included electric prodding the faces of pigs and piglets being repeatedly hit and kicked, pigs found dead, sick, and injured, and castration and tail docking performed on newborn piglets with a dirty X-Acto knife and no anesthetic or pain relief. That being said, the Canadian Code of Practice is by no means in favor of the animals. For instance, the recommendation to farmers of how to deal with sick piglets is to grasp them by their hind legs and repeatedly smash their skulls onto a concrete floor until they're dead. Or for birds, like chickens and turkeys, it's impossible for each animal to be checked daily. There are simply too many individuals per barn. But if a worker happens to see a sick bird, they're instructed to grab them by the head, snap their necks, and throw them in the garbage. Another recommended best practice is to use open blowtorch flames to burn hair off the udders of dairy cows. Egg-laying hens have their beaks chopped off. Turkeys have their toes removed. And day-old baby male chicks are blended alive simply because they don't lay eggs. The Canadian Code of Practice are guidelines set in place for profitability and ease to farmers, not for the welfare of animals. And despite these guidelines being horrific, this is the highest standard set for Canadian farmers, and they're not even required or enforced under the law. In fact, in Canada, there are no federal laws governing the treatment or protection of farmed animals. None. When it comes to farmed animals, nothing is considered illegal. The only laws set in place are during the transportation from farm to slaughterhouse. But even then, the transportation laws are in favor of the industry, not the animals, and they are self-regulated. Pigs in Canada can be transported for up to 28 hours with no food, water, or rest, in all temperatures and weather conditions. I've seen pigs arrive at the slaughterhouse with frostbitten ears and noses, with their skin frozen to the side of the metal trucks. The transportation laws that do exist for these animals are atrocious to begin with, but there is also no one ensuring that they're actually being followed. And just like farms, animal testing laboratories are also unregulated, with no federal laws, just a voluntary compliance system. There was whistleblower footage taken from a lab in eastern Canada, and although awful animal cruelty to dogs and primates was documented, no one was charged, because there are no laws protecting those animals, so nothing was illegal. Unfortunately, we cannot rely on our governments or organizations like the SPCA to fight for animal liberation. It is truly up to grassroots activists. As an advocate for other animals, I feel it is my job to ensure that powerful people in courts hear the argument that animals must be considered and their lives need to be taken seriously. Deliberately getting arrested for animal rights, like storming that pig farm with hundreds of others in broad daylight, takes the power back and pushes for legal change. Because of my arrests, my court proceedings will start soon, and it's legal cases like these that bring these issues to the table and prompt change. There will be losses, just like past social justice movements for females, people of color, and gay rights. But eventually, if activists keep the pressure on, the laws will change. Our legal and political systems need to be challenged regarding the use and abuse of animals. We all know the Gandhi quote, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win." From what I can tell, the animal movement is starting the fight stage right now. Not only are animals being silenced, but so are their advocates. Ag-gag laws are being introduced into provinces across Canada, which would make it illegal for employees and the general public to film and report animal abuse. It would also increase penalties for citizens who attempt to rescue animals from harm, and it would implement higher charges for those who trespass onto farm properties. We are talking insanely high penalties here, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and years in prison. This is for simply entering a business, taking out your phone, and pressing record. These ag-gag laws are one of the biggest threats to animals in Canada right now. The industry is lobbying hard for these ag-gag laws. The dairy farmers of Canada are lobbying on every level with a marketing budget of $80 million. And the Canadian fur industry is lobbying to introduce legislation making animal advocacy a terrorism offense. They want activists to be jailed for telling the truth about the horrific reality on fur farms. These ag-gag laws are about one thing and one thing only: hiding animal cruelty. The animal agriculture industry relies entirely on secrecy. They know and we know that if people saw the real, raw reality of what truly happens to animals from farm to table, that they would no longer want to support it. There is huge incentive for farmers in Canada to farm animals. The grants, subsidies, and tax breaks are unbelievable. Dairy farmers alone receive billions in subsidies each year. And the Canadian government just announced a $3 billion partnership with the beef industry for significant marketing efforts in Asia. So regardless of how they're portrayed, farmers are not struggling financially. And unfortunately, a big reason for that is our tax-paying dollars. But marketing, laws, finances, and government involvement aside, at the end of the day, we can't discuss any of these things without recognizing that animals are suffering significantly. Animals are not robots or meat, milk, and egg-producing machines. They are intelligent and incredibly sensitive creatures. They all have a preference to avoid pain and death, just like us. I've spent a lot of time at slaughterhouses, and even blocks away, you can still hear the screams of pigs as they are burning inside gas chambers. Hearing those screams changes you. Watching documentaries like Earthlings or Dominion is nothing compared to being there, hearing it, smelling it, feeling it. These injustices are happening in every country and every city. And aside from activists, these animals have no representatives anywhere. The choices we make as consumers have consequences that are largely unseen and unheard consequences, because that's what the industry wants. And to think that these things aren't done for some greater justifiable reason. Humans destroy the lives of other animals for profit and pleasure. That is a critical problem. The industries have more power than we do right now, and I feel that we need to change that. These animals are shot in the head and having their throats slit. They are hooked up to machines and shoved in cages. They are lowered into gas chambers and are freezing to death on transport trucks. They are thrown, kicked, punched, stabbed, and electrocuted. And those are just the farmed animals. What about the animals exploited for clothing, testing, entertainment? The list goes on. I want to challenge the normality of animal violence, so I have dedicated my life, my freedom, my comforts, and everything I have to helping animals achieve liberation. Some people do this work and remain anonymous, but I have chosen to use my voice to amplify their voices. It's a shitty job going into these places and documenting the terrors. I don't do this for fun, and I certainly have nothing to personally gain by doing this. But in a world where animals' voices are silenced, I refuse to let mine be. So in conclusion, should non-human animals have fundamental rights? Do they deserve to be protected? Or should animal advocates be silenced? What is more radical? Animal exploitation or animal activism? Thank you.